Yeah, come on in. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, welcome. So, welcome to the Consciousness Transformed tape group. And as you can tell, it's a great meeting. I love it. I love to join with you in this beautiful light of recognition, of seeing what is real and what isn't. So it's a bit like, okay, we said in the very first meeting, like, do you recognize that your life has become unmanageable, that you really cannot deal with it, with all the impossibilities of it, and that's a good sign, that you can in fact now get excited about it, that it is that way, since it is impossible. So you don't have to try to work it out, to make it work. And that's an important part of the Consciousness Transformed, recognizing that the problem as you perceive it isn't solvable. And that's because, in fact, it is mesmerism, it's perception. It is that what you see with your eyes and what you esteem as real, but yeah, reality is a whole different order. And that change into the recognition of wholeness is taking place. So this is the infinite way of the transformational path that you're walking. So it's like that is taking place. And the only requirement for you is to stay connected, to stay in your practice, to allow yourself to die daily in the impossibility of it, and see that your life is not depending on that at all. But there's behind all of that, there's a recognition of the wholeness, of the loveliness that created you, and that you can be in touch with, like communing with, and that is the practice that we do. And very simple in that sense, but it is a matter of staying right there and doing it. So that's really lovely. So this is an essential part in that too. We come together, first we will meditate, and I use words from Joel in this meditation. The last probably 2 minutes of his talk, Joel is actually in a prayer state of mind, directly communicating, like, I and my Father are one, in such a way that it is so useful to let that come to you in the meditation, to let that comfort you, so that the comfort is like, that will be the catalyst to come into a communion with God. So that's why we use this, and so let's start with that.
What we didn't know was I and my Father are one. We thought we were a man of earth, somehow separate and apart from God, somehow lost, strayed, or stolen, and not knowing how to get back. But now we know I and the Father are one. I have nearly lost my way because I have lost my identity. I haven't consciously known who I am, what I am, and even where I am. I and my Father are one. I live and move and have my being in that infinite divine consciousness. I am under the law of infinite good. I am subject only to the influence of this infinite, and there is this Christ, Spirit of God, Benahuni, any other name you like. There is this in my consciousness. Goes before me to make the crooked places straight, walks beside me as God, hovers over me as an angel. Of it, the Master said, I am the bread, the wine, and the water. I am come that ye might have life, and that ye might have life more abundant. I will never leave thee nor forsake thee. So, if only you remember to give it the name I, and then realize whether you mount up to heaven in happiness today, or whether you go down to hell in unhappiness tomorrow, or walk through the valley of the shadow of death the day after, I am with thee, and I will never leave thee. I will be with thee unto the end of the world. And recognize the fact that the secret name of this presence is I.
All right. So that's great. So thank you so much for joining in the meditation and in the song. I heard it today. I haven't heard it for a long time, so it was so great to hear this song again. So it brings me to the garden. Really lovely. Now Joel in our meditation says, well, we forgot who we are. We forgot where we are, and we forgot how we are, and all of that. And so this is a matter of identity, like what's going on. How would I know how to respond to any situation I am in if I don't even know who I am? Honestly, like, is my awareness of who I am completely in my consciousness? I know exactly where I am and how to respond or how not to respond, and how to recognize myself in that sense. So that is something that we take with us. Like, that makes it immediately that you in fact have no idea what to do, where to go, and how to respond to any of this. That is a reasonable conclusion. And in practice, we try to give answers to our questions. We try to figure out what road to go, what decisions to make, but in the meantime, not even realizing who we are. So we keep circulating in some kind of human idea until we see that, like, well, that's not the answer. That's not the way to do it. There must be another way. I cannot come up with it, apparently. And this is why I started with, like, the thing is that your life has become unmanageable. You don't know what's the best for you. You can not decide what's the best for you unless you fully realize who you are. Then you don't even have to ask questions, and you don't have to figure it out at all. So that is the difference. Now, Joel, in this is the end of the talk that we listened to in the meditation, and in that sense it was like a summary of the tape. Now, to step into the middle of it, Joel talks about the subliminal communication. Like, that's some information that you receive without being conscious of it, and there's a lot of it. If you trust your perception, there's a lot of it, and you're simply not aware of what you pick up. Now here, Joel goes a step further and says, well, in the end, that does not have any power. That's why they stopped the experiments with flashing the word Coke during meetings or during cinema or anything else too. And it's like, in the end, it has no power, and because nothing outside of you has any power. So here, I'm going very quick here, I know that. It's like we're going to the idea of nullifying. One of Joel's inventions, you could say, in terms of words, to nullify is not really something that you find in the dictionary. So that's interesting then to use that word. But yeah, we will use that word today. So I found some expressions of Joel, but here actually I use it in a certain sense paradoxically. I use it different than you would expect, because I'm basically stating what cannot be nullified. I'm like, okay, I can recognize the meaninglessness of my ideas about things, or I can recognize the meaninglessness of the existence that was so important a moment ago, but has, yeah, melted away, you could say, or has dissolved, and yeah, it wasn't that important, or it was not really something that, yeah, I had to discover that it was nothing, in fact. Now here in the nullifying, as I use it today with Joel's words, of course, it is like you cannot nullify love. And that's a very specific expression. If you feel that sentence, you could say it's like, oh, that's such an incredible comfort. Like, what is real cannot be nullified. That's why nullification, even though it is literally seeing what isn't, so it wasn't anything to begin with, but you thought it was something, and you thought it was worth going for. It was worth pointing your attention to. It was worth, in fact, being concerned about. You put so much energy in something that is actually, if you nullify it, is of non-importance, and no importance at all. Now here, in fact, like I said, I use it the other way around. Now, this cannot be nullified, and that is the reality of who you are. Cannot be nullified. All the rest can go, but truth cannot be nullified. Love cannot be nullified. Like that, of course, that is impossible, but you don't always realize it. Or you, like how you need constantly, in fact, confirmation that love exists, that love remains, that love is always be with you, that love is always you, that you can always return to love, that when you release fear, you immediately return to love. Like that is an awareness of love's presence. That is what love is. This is what you are. This is what created you. So that's why it is so incredibly comforting to read sentences like that. And that you cannot nullify truth. Now here, Joel brings it with some force here. Oops. Nobody has ever been able to nullify the law of love. Nobody has ever been able to nullify the law of truth, which is in fact the same law. Nobody has ever been able to nullify the law of life. That all goes on and on and on, because it has its basis in the infinite, in the omnipresence, omnipotence, omniscience. That's where it has its basis in. It is forever, so it cannot be nullified. It cannot change. In other words, it's changeless. It is your certainty. Now this bring it back to the idea of your idea about yourself, because you have an idea about yourself. Now here's another realization that came to me this week. Is like the one thing that you can realize too here is this, is that you cannot look beyond what you think you are. Right? You cannot really look beyond that. You cannot do that. So in other words, what you think that you are is always determining how you experience yourself. Now that seems like a deep philosophical question, but it's actually like good to realize. So what do you think you are? Since we're talking about identity, what do you think you are? Who do you think you are? Do you recognize yourself consciously as the I that I am? Do you recognize yourself consciously I and my Father are one, that you're a complete and whole part of what creation is. Now this is where we're coming into. It's like that is not just to share just like that. So it is a bit of a sinking into it in your consciousness. Like there's no way that a definition would tell you anything about yourself. In other words, this can only be experienced. Now, the loveliness that we just heard in the song, for instance, in the garden, you can also catch a glimpse of that light effect that is available, and which tells you about where you truly abide. You cannot grasp it, you cannot put it into words, and you don't have to do that at all. No, but you recognize the light that is in fact extended in it. So here in our nullification process of seeing that truth cannot be nullified, there's no such thing as doing that. There's no use for it. So whatever can be nullified, great. Whatever can be seen as the meaningless that it is, you will no longer be concerned with that. You will no longer let yourself be taken by it. It will no longer determine what you think you are. This is the important part. Like, it can no longer tell you what you are. If you recognize from within what you are, nothing outside of you can tell you what you are. And that's where the peace of mind comes from, like, of course. So if you're full of anxiety or having like long, like a roller coaster kind of moments in your life where you don't realize that there's peace available, but completely are in fact out of control in this movement, emotional movement, then step back and in fact come in touch with this light. Search, look for this light, for all the loveliness that it brings, just as this garden. You might want to take a walk in that sense. You might take a walk and then walk slower than you ever did, to be totally conscious of where you are, to be completely, in fact, present in what you do, and start to communicate just by slowing down, by coming into touch with yourself, by releasing your ideas about yourself, by nullifying these ideas, and see that truth and love cannot be nullified. That's why I can experience that in my quietude. I can experience that. I can breathe that. And now I can start to love myself again too. It's like literally a whole new world opens up when I allow myself to quiet down to the level of where nothing is can be nullified anymore. So I thought this was a great expression of Joel, since Joel brings it really like a law, like, okay, it's written like this, it's like this. So I always love that with him, like there's a certainty behind it, and this is the way that is. And so what he actually is offering is to you is in comfort and in recognition. That is literally the help that is available. That's literally going to save you from yourself, from your ideas about yourself. And that is so lovely about it. So we continue with this. Nobody has ever been able to nullify the law of love. We saw that. You never can destroy 2 times 2 is 4. You can never destroy H2O as water. You can never destroy anything that has the law of infinity behind it. You never can destroy the law of like begets like. When you plant apples, you just cannot get any other fruit than apples. And you can't get vegetables, it has to be apples. You cannot change that law. You cannot nullify truth. You can't change truth no matter what kind of mental manipulation you do. You cannot change truth. You can't alter it. You can't destroy it. And why would you? But you can't do it. So it's like Joel is basically directing us to the idea of, you could say, power. Like what is has power. It has no opposite. It cannot be destroyed. It's not something that can change by... Joel uses the example of Satan too. Like it cannot be touched by Satan. It cannot be changed by an opposing force, because there's literally no such thing as that. If what is, if truth is true, then there's nothing else than that. So that means there's also no, there's no defense to be made. There's nothing that can attack that. See, that's why the world that you find yourself in your daily experience of yourself, is impossible. Is literally a place that cannot be real because of all its change. You can change in the direction that you go in. You can change the partner that you're with. You can change the car that you drive. You can change, and on and on and on. This is what you do in your dream. You change everything, like in the hope that it gets better. Well, does it get better? No, of course not. The whole place where you make the adjustment isn't real. So how could that ever fulfill you? It is literally impossible. And this is a lesson. I have to laugh because it's like, it is a lesson. So I can share a lesson with you. That doesn't mean that you have learned it or that I have learned it. It's like, that is, in all honesty, it's like a lesson is a lesson. A lesson is something that you can accept immediately, completely. Then you don't have to learn that lesson again. But if you want to have your own experience in learning that lesson, you go through a couple of hoops, you could say. You go through a couple of changes in your life that you didn't expect, or surprises, or deep disappointments, because you bet on all the best horses, and now they didn't win, and there goes your savings, or there goes your fantastic holiday you had in mind. Now this, you see, that is. This is the impossible place that you find yourself on a daily basis, esteeming it as real, seeing that everything changes. The dollar is now this high, the dollar is this low, the stocks are like that, and the world economics are changing. This is changing, that is changing. Everything changes on a moment-by-moment basis. It's the nature of the place. That's why it cannot be real. And that doesn't mean that you don't have to deal with it. So that's the interesting part of it. So you find yourself in a paradox, apparently. You find yourself in a paradox where you see that happen. You wish you had a key to all the questions that you have about it, or all the directions that you need to go, all the choices that you have to make. You would love to have that be guided. Now here's the thing, that is possible. You can be guided. And the only, say, part for you then is to not make the decision. Since you're apparently, when you perceive problems, when you perceive that situations in which you think you have to make a choice, you know you're not in the right place to make that decision. As simple as that. Like, you're not able to do that so that it's helpful for everyone involved. Because in fact, in truth, there is no decision to be made. And you perceive yourself in a place that is changing, changeable, and has nothing to do with your reality. That's why you cannot make a choice. Now, like I said, this is a lesson, and you're gonna learn that the hard way, gentle way, all kinds of ways, and there's nothing wrong with that. It is just now we're talking about this. It's in fact the greatest help that is available is to learn to listen, to learn to in fact follow the guidance that is given, to stand still sufficiently that you stay in your connection of I walk in the garden while the dew is still on the roses. Like he holds my hand while I walk through the garden. If I realize that in all its lovely simplicity, feeling my connection, then I don't have to make a choice. Like literally the seas are opening, the next footstep is already clearly pointed at me if I'm slowing down sufficiently. So that's, I think, the loveliness of this message that Joel is bringing us today. But we're going to listen to the first half hour of it, so you can see what you will discover today. And so let's listen to Joel.
This is meant to be a practical experience tonight. An experience that is meant to give us a practical way of life or principle of life if we can remember that in every experience we must bring this to conscious remembrance. I'm going to start out by telling you that the religious and mythological literature of the world has a theme that runs through it that is not too greatly understood and sometimes taken lightly. In the religious literature, I refer to a statement of the Masters, "The Father within me doeth the works," or of Paul's, "I can do all things through Christ, which dwelleth in me." Or in the Hebrew texts, "There is a spirit in man." And in much of the religious literature of the world, the subject of angels, or a presence. All of these things refer to just one thing, and it makes no difference whether you find this in the Hebrew religion, the Christian, the Buddhist, or any other. It all refers to one thing, and that is that there is a something greater than our human capacities, our human understanding, something beyond our human understanding, which at some time or other plays a very good part in our experience and in the lives of those the spiritually illumined. It performs a permanent experience of good. For instance, when Elijah was banished and was living in the wilderness hunted, he found that when it was time to eat, he was fed. One time a poor widow shared with him. Another time he awakened to find cakes baking on a stone in front of him. At another time ravens brought food. In other words, what this is trying to tell us is that the spiritual nature of Elijah, the spiritual presence, the Messiah, the Christ, the Spirit of God in man, whatever you want to call it, that in his moments of need cared for him, gave him the protection, the food, safety from his enemies, hiding places. In the experience of Moses, we find that whatever the spiritual experience was that Moses had on the mountaintop, that later, when he was leading the Hebrews out of Egypt, that when he needed it, there was a cloud by day, a pillar of fire by night, that surrounded him and his people and protected them from the enemy, that manna fell from the sky, the Red Sea opened. Whether it was a literal experience or symbolic makes no difference. It was an experience in which something of a more than human nature performed this miracle of safety, security, feeding. So you can go through the religious literature of the world in any and every mystical teaching, and you will discover that something of a miraculous nature was always present in time of need. Eventually, there built up a religious teaching that gave us not only the promise of this presence of something divine, but there sprung up also another presence. The devil, Satan, evil, the angel of death, so that there were good influences in the lives of those who were entitled to the good, and there were evil influences in the experience of those who were entitled to some evil. This idea of what you might call the supernatural was extended into the literature of mythology. And here is where you perhaps find angels as much as you do in the religious world, but you find another group as well. In Hawaiian mythology you have the Menehunis, who are always out doing some good things for the people that they humanly could not have done for themselves. And the Irish have their little Irish Menehunis. The Norwegians, the Nordics, all have their angels of one kind or another. And you find in the folk literature of ancients always this something or other that is a protective influence in the experience of the pioneers of the early people. Now, this has never, so far as I know, been explained to the people of the world. The secret seems to remain in the unexplained religious and mythological teachings. But we come to another wider phase of this, and I'm going to illustrate it in just one instance so as to give you an idea of the entire subject. Richard Wagner, in his opera Parsifal, seemingly has an entire cast of characters. One of these is an old man who has lived a very good, pure life as the keeper of the Holy Grail, the golden cup, the chalice. And he has done his work nobly and well, protected it from theft and harm. But he has a son who takes over from him when he retires, and this son is not so conscientious and permits the Holy Grail to be stolen. Also, it turns out he's not quite as pure as his father, and the first thing you know, he is associating with a woman of low morals. And he goes from one fix to another, always with evil companions and so forth, and misfortunes. But lo and behold, he has a son. And this son is as pure as his grandfather. And he restores the stolen Holy Grail and becomes its faithful guardian. It's just a brief summary of some main points. Because what Wagner is telling us is this: there is only one character in his entire opera, just one man. And that man, in his original state of purity, this is the grandfather, is the embodiment of the qualities of good, purity, wholeness, wholesomeness. But he also embodies within himself the potentiality of dropping from his pure estate to ordinary humanhood, a combination of good and evil, and he does so, and this is his own son. In other words, this is another facet of his own nature. Elsewhere, you have that as the first Adam in the Garden of Eden, and then the Adam who has been cast out of the Garden of Eden because he did not maintain his purity. And then you find, in spite of the fact of the human impossibility of it, he has two sons who fight each other with qualities of good and evil, all of which also is to bring forth the fact that this one man Adam, the first Adam and the last Adam, are the same Adam in different states of consciousness. Now, in Parseval, as soon as the human qualities appear, you have not only the carelessness that results in the theft of the Holy Grail, you have not only the individual untrue to his trust, but then you have him even sinking lower and associating with people of low character, designated in this opera as an immoral woman. Now, the old man has the potentiality of becoming the human and does so. But you see, the human with all of his failings has the potentiality of becoming pure again. And here you have the story of the prodigal, the son of the king, the son of the Most High, and then the prodigal who wanders out and gets to the lower steps and then returns to his father's house. See how many different ways, in different forms of literature, the lesson is being revealed to us that we, in our own consciousness, embody this entire world, all of its good and all of its evil, and we outpicture it as if it were you and me, and he and she, instead of realizing that our experiences are all the externalization of the state of consciousness to which we have lent ourselves at a given moment. We may have started out as the very finest of children, and then become the most wicked of men or women, and then become the very finest of men and women again, because always we were not in the world is in us. And we are externalizing in our lives our own states of consciousness. We embody within ourselves the angel, the Menahuni, the Christ, the Spirit of God. We also embody within ourselves the angel of death, of superstition, of ignorance, of fear. The Master is all off by himself, alone. And then all of a sudden, the devil appears before him. But you see, there was no devil there. He was alone in the wilderness. And the devil is an externalization of his own state of consciousness. That's what he is projecting, and he's not being tempted from outside. He's being tempted from inside. There may be 100,000 bank tellers in the country, and probably 5 of them are being tempted by the money in front of them, and none of the rest of them. But that sort of, to me, would indicate that it isn't the money that's tempting anyone. The temptation is from within. Of course, we are always projecting it, and we are saying, he tempted me, she tempted me, it tempted me. When you come to spiritual maturity, you realize how nonsensical that is. That nothing and no one has the power to tempt except whatever our own weakness may be. And in that direction, we fall. Or we put up a fight. and we're fighting the devil, or we're fighting Satan, or we're fighting, in this modern day, we don't say devil or Satan, we just say temptation. You see, no one really has dominion in his own life until he comes to an understanding of the fact that he embraces within his own consciousness all that he is to externalize in his experience. There is the story told of a man getting on a train at a certain stop and seating himself beside a minister in the train. And as they came near to the next station, it was evident the minister was going to get off, and the man said, "Oh, do you live here in this town?" "Yes, I do." "Well, I'm thinking of coming here to live. What kind of a town is this? What kind of people do you have here?" The minister looked at him and said, "Why, what kind of people do you have in the town that you have lived in?" "Oh," he said, "they're mean, they're bad, they're ugly." "That's just exactly what you're going to meet in this town. Of course, you're bringing them here. You're bringing them here. You can't find in this town anything that you don't bring here. If you are to find love, you must bring love. If you are to find friendship, you must bring friendship. If you are to find honesty, you must bring the honesty. It isn't here. It isn't out in the air. It isn't in the air in this room or out on the street or in the building. Whatever qualities there are, these qualities are to be found in consciousness, your consciousness or mine. Success, well, of course, there are some people going to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning and start to get on the job for their success, and others are going to wait till 8 or 9. But whether they get up at 6 or whether they get up at 9, nothing outside of them is making them do it either way. They are being prompted from within. Now, the reason for this that I'm telling you is that it leads back to the original revelation of this message, and that is the word consciousness. I embody in my consciousness infinity. Without knowing this, I lay myself open to being the victim of thoughts, ideas that I may pick up out of the atmosphere. Actually, not out of the atmosphere, but out of consciousness. This you see clearly once you perceive that there is only one universal mind of man. In other words, the same qualities that prompt Americans in their human life are the same qualities that prompt Englishmen or Germans or Frenchmen. Humanly, we are all alike. I don't mean that every individual is like every other individual, but I mean that every race is like every other race in that they are prompted by the same motives. In the human experience, it begins with self-preservation. As you go higher in the human scale, it takes on charity, brotherly love, benevolence, sharing. But the qualities of greed, animality, lust, hate, envy, jealousy, and the qualities of friendship, sharing, brotherly love, benevolence, equality, justice. These same qualities are to be found in humans throughout the world. One human may have more of one than another, but in the races you'll find them all. And the reason is there is only one universal mind of man. Now, because the world has been in ignorance, it doesn't know that we can pick up anything that is in that universal mind and be influenced by it without knowing it. The very first time that I was able to give you the positive proof of it was when we had the problem of subliminal advertising. You remember it? Now, that was a very, very tough experience to go through, but it was a very illuminating one because it enabled me for the first time to be able to prove that this is true, that there is one universal mind and that we can be influenced by it without even knowing that we are being influenced by it or that it is being projected at us. In this experiment, as you know, the attempt was made to sell products to you without letting you know that the advertising was being directed at you. You couldn't see it or hear it or taste it or touch it or smell it, and yet you jumped up out of your chair and went out and acted on it. Now, this is exactly what I mean by the influences that govern our human experience. A man is tempted to steal and in his ignorance thinks that he is a thief, whereas this is actually being directed at him. Another man is tempted sensually, another man is tempted in some other way, but always it isn't the man, it is a subliminal activity of that universal mind projecting itself and to which we respond without even knowing that we are being hypnotized. Now, in the case of the subliminal advertising, the hypnotizing is being done by those individuals who are responsible for projecting it. But in this that I'm speaking of, it is not being projected from any personal standpoint or by any individual or group of individuals, but it is an activity of the universal mind projecting itself, and we respond at whatever level our temptation may be. The moment that you perceive that there is a universal mind that is projecting these, well, let's call them traits or qualities, envy, jealousy, malice, greed, lust, false ambition. The moment you know that there is a universal mind projecting these, you can protect yourself by turning it off in the same way that you would switch off your telephone. You can just disconnect yourself from it in the recognition of it as what Paul called the carnal mind. In other words, this carnal mind, or the universal human mind, is not a power in the sense that it is God ordained, that it has a law behind it. Actually, it operates much in the same way. Here we have another illustration. It operates much in the same way as the medical belief operated for decades, that said sitting in a draft or getting your feet wet would give you a cold. Now this operated as if it were a law, and people actually sat in a draft and got cold, and they actually got their feet wet and got cold. Whereas sitting in a draft or getting your feet wet is absolutely an impossibility as a cause of cold. I had the pleasure of teaching that to a doctor in 1935 and then witnessing it in 1963 become accepted by the materia medica profession. Now actually though, it did operate to give many people colds, yet it had no such power. Its only power was the power of universal acceptance. Probably within 10 years from now, no one will ever again catch cold from sitting in a draft or getting their feet wet, because authority has removed the power from it and said, oh, it's ridiculous, it cannot be. Now this is not the first experience of that kind in materia medica. 50 years ago, the medical textbooks on health, on mental diseases, gave two principal causes for the filled mental institutes. And there was only one reason that women occupied mental institutes, and that was menopause. That had all of the mental institutes filled with women. Now, there are no more women there because of that, because it has been discovered that menopause is not menopause, what is it? Is it menopause yet? Menopause. Menopause is not the cause of insanity. This is a medical law today, and because it's a medical law today, we no longer have women in mental institutes through menopause. In other words, the belief operating in the universal mind really operated as a law, as long as people were ignorant of the fact that it wasn't a law. Now that they know it isn't a law, it doesn't operate anymore. So, individually, anyone who comes to the realization that the operation of this universal mind of man is not a law and does not function as law, begins to set them free from its operation. And bit by bit, it begins to disappear. Because an externalized condition is maintained by the belief that is supporting it. Remove the belief that is supporting it, and you have no more externalized condition. It is like a picture on the screen. Remove your film, and you have no more picture on the screen. Remove the picture from mind, that is the picture of law, and you immediately begin to lose the externalized picture. So it is then that the moment that you realize that from a human standpoint that you are an antenna for the universal human mind or carnal mind, and take dominion by understanding that all of these so-called laws that no longer operate as law, that these laws are not law, and you begin to nullify them in your experience. When they tried subliminal advertising, the first results were as good as 60 to 70%, 55%, 54%. In other words, flash, and all of a sudden, more than half of you get up and walk out of the room and start to look for a bottle of Coca-Cola. None of you know why, but you did. And the reason was that this subliminal advertising was put to work in consciousness, and without you knowing it, you responded to it. Why doesn't it work today? See, before they got through with it, the final results were less than 0.5%. Why? Because of the work that was done to nullify its activity in consciousness. And the strange part was that they're pretty smart men. They put up $2 million for it, so you know they were smart. When it failed them the first time and they couldn't understand it, they waited 2 years to try it again. And then when they couldn't operate it the second time, they gave up. And they scrapped all of their machinery and decided, and they disbanded the corporation.